Good morning, it's Rabbi Elton here from the Great Synagogue, and welcome to our weekly Rashi class. Today is also Yom HaShoah, so I want to dedicate our learning this morning to the memory of the 6 million Kedoshim, the 6 million members of our people who laid down their lives, who were murdered by the Nazis in the Shoah. And I think it's very touching to reflect on the fact that many of those Jews would have learnt these Rashis and other Rashis in their lives, whether they were long or short, before they were terminated by the Nazi oppressors. And so we learn these in their memory, and we wish that their neshamot should have Aliyah, so their soul should rise higher and higher in heaven. Our topic this morning is probably one of the least accessible and least acceptable to our modern sensibilities, and that's leprosy. Leprosy was a physical manifestation of a spiritual disease. Essentially, when people sinned in a particular way, and there's discussion about what that type of sin was, a very common suggestion is it was lashon hara, it was gossip or slander. But when people committed a sin of some sort, or a variety of sins, they'd be struck down with leprosy, which was some sort of eruption in the skin, and that caused them to be quarantined, which is, I suppose, a topical idea at the moment, and sent off outside the camp until they'd healed. Which is why, if the sin indeed was lashon hara, was slander or gossip, it's very appropriate, because it's a social punishment for a social infraction. We gossip, we slander, that is destructive of the societal and communal bonds that we try and build up, so people are sent outside the community in order to atone for that and to think about what they've done wrong. Now, because it's a spiritually caused disease, you don't go to a doctor, you go to a Kohen, you go to the priest. Part of the priestly duty was to examine people who came to them with abnormalities on their skin, to determine whether these were just regular physical diseases, or it was saras, it was leprosy, which had to be treated in the appropriate religious way, which the kohanim, which the priest would direct. So this, the third Aliyah of Tazria, and we're looking at third Aliyah this year, describes what the skin looks like and how the disease of saras develops and how it can be spotted by the Kohen. So quite a technical section, and Rashi takes great pains to help us understand exactly what we're talking about and exactly what we're looking at. So we're at chapter 13 of Leviticus, and at verse 18 of Vayikra of Leviticus. Now, there are a few stages. Let's look at the first stage. Uvasar kiyeh vo v'oro shechin v'nirpa. So first of all, what happens is you have on the skin of your flesh, you have an inflammation, and then it heals. So it gets red, and then that redness subsides in some way. Okay, let's see what Rashi says about this shechin, this inflammation. He says l'shon chimum. This implies a heat. Shenischameim habasar bilikui haba lo mechamas maka shelo mechamas haor. This is a heating up of the skin that comes as a result of it being hit, not as a result of it coming into contact with fire. So we know, of course, that when you have a burn, then the skin heats up after you've been burned, but also it seems that when one is struck, also the skin becomes inflamed as a result of that striking, of that injury. And while in a few verses' time, after we've finished our portion as it happens, it's going to talk about inflammation that comes as a result of contact with fire, of heat. This is a inflammation that comes from contact with being struck. That's what we're talking about. So it's a inflammation which looks like it results from being hit. So that arises, and then v'nirpa, but then it heals over. So Rashi says, Hashchin he'ela arucha bimkomo he'ela nega acher. What happens is the inflammation becomes healed, and in its place comes something else. And is that something else which is the potential saras? The potential leprosy is not the initial inflammation, it's what comes after the inflammation itself has died down. So let's look at the next verse, and it goes on with the progression of events. Vaya bimkom hashchin se'es levana, and then in the place of the original inflammation comes some sort of white discoloration, or Baheres Levana Adam Dames, or it's a mixture of white and red. It's some sort of skin complaint which is a mixture of white and red. Now that can be a mixture in more than one way. It can be pink because it's a mixture of white and red, as one would do on a artist's palette, and becomes pink, or it might be like a barbershop pole, stripes of white and red. We'll see what Rashi thinks in a minute. V'nira ela Kohen, and when that arises, then you take it to the Kohen. When you just got a regular inflammation, it could be from anything. But once the inflammation dies down and is replaced by this white or red-white skin problem, then at that point you go off to the Kohen. So let's have a look at what Rashi says about this thing being reddish-white. So, she'ein hanega lavan chalak, it's not evenly white all the way over. Ela pasuch umorav bishtei maros, but rather it is a mixture of two different colours, lovein ve'odain, white and red. So I think what Rashi's talking about is in fact the more barbershop pole appearance. It's a mixture, it's not a pure pink, let alone a pure white, it's a mixture of white bits and red bits. So it's either entirely white or a mixture of white and red. The next verse. V'ra HaKohen, and the police, Kohen makes a determination. He inspects it. V'nei mareha shafal min ha'ar, and it appears that this white or white-red spot is lower than the rest of the skin. Usara hafach lavan, and the hair which grows on this spot has turned white. V'timel HaKohen, at that point the Kohen declares that this person is now ritually impure. He is tameh, he has entered into the state of ritual impurity. Negasarasi, this is now leprosy. Bashkin paracha, as a result of the outbreak in the place of this initial inflammation. Now there's an interesting phrase here because it says mareha shafa min ha'ar. It appears to be lower than the rest of the skin. So is it lower than the rest of the skin or is it not? So Rashi says ein mamasha shafal, it's not really lower than the rest of the skin. Ela mitoch lavnoniso hu nira shafal va'amok, but rather because it's white it looks like it's lower. K'mareh chama amuka min atzel. Sometimes when you have uneven ground and there are parts of the ground which are lower, the way the sun shines on it, the lower part is illuminated more brightly. So it appears lower because it seems to have the same appearance as low ground surrounded by higher ground, which shines more brightly. The whiteness makes it look like it's lower. Next verse 21. V'im paso siser ba'or. Now, if it spreads in the skin, v'timei hakohen oso nagahi, then the priest again declares that this is a real infection, and he declares him to be ritually impure. So, if it's lower, you got a problem, and if it spreads, you got a problem. And Rashi just clarifies, we're not talking about the whole shchin. We're not talking about the whole inflammation. We're just talking about this white spot. Haseis hazos or habaheres. Only if the white or reddish-white spot expands, then you are leprous. But if it's just the inflammation that spreads around, that we're not worried about. Verse 23. Ve'im tachtea tamod habaheres lo pasasa sareves hashchin hashchinchi v'tiharo hakohen. But if this discoloration remains, well, tachtea means under it. That doesn't make sense in the context. So let's find out what Rashi's going to say about that. But if it remains in its place, doesn't move around, then all you're talking about really is a scar of the original inflammation, and therefore the person is clean. They're not ritually impure. In other words, they really were hit by something, they banged into something, there was inflammation, and then when the inflammation went down, a scar remained. That's not leprosy, that's just the result of an accident. Now, what's this strange phrase, tachteha? So, bimkoma, in its place. It doesn't say under it, that makes no sense. But this word in this context just means it stays in its place, it doesn't expand, it doesn't move around. And the final Rashi we will look at, when it says here, Tzareves hashchin, this scar of the original inflammation. So Rashi does now what he often does. He refers to the Aramaic translation. So there's an ancient translation of the Bible, certainly the Torah, into Aramaic. Aramaic in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara was the lingua franca, was the spoken language of the Jews of the land of Israel and of Babylon. Different Aramaics and different parts, different dialects of Aramaic, but they spoke Aramaic. And in the land of Israel, there was an Aramaic translation which is attributed to Onkelos, who was supposedly a convert who was the nephew of the Emperor Hadrian, and he translated the Torah into Aramaic. And as with all translations, there are also interpretations and commentaries. The way one chooses to translate certain words is itself an assertion of the meaning of those words. There's no such thing as a pure translation without agenda. So Rashi will often refer to the Targum and say, the Targum translated this way, this is the Targum's view of what the words mean. So he says, Ketargumo Roshem Shichana, it's just a scar from the original inflammation. Eino ela Roshem Hachimum Hanika Babasar, it's just a mark in the flesh as a result of the original inflammation. Kol Sareves Lashon Regias Or, and in fact this word Sareves always means a contraction of the skin. So this is something we do see, I think, when we have a burn, for example, and as it heals, the dry skin on top sort of contracts. That's what we're talking about. The Hanirga Mechamas Chimum, it as a result of the heat, there's following that comes contraction. Now another very typical Rashi piece of methodology, which is to quote another verse which from somewhere else in the Bible which explains this. And there's actually a verse in the book of Yechezkel, in Ezekiel, which uses this phrase. The nitzravu ba kol panim, all faces will be shriveled up, says the prophet Ezekiel. Same word. The nitzravu is the same as tzareves, same word. And then a final, this is very rich, this Rashi, because you see three things Rashi does all in the same comment to try and elucidate a meaning. He then quotes Old French. So Old French was the language of the Jews of his day and in his place, and when all else fails, he translates it into the French that the Jews around him understand. And he says this is retrocere belaz. In Old French, the word for what we're talking about is retrocere, or as we would say in English, retract, when the skin has retracted, has contracted, and has come together, leaving a sort of shriveled top. So if all you have is a shriveled, non-coloured, not lower, not spreading piece of skin on top, that's nothing to do with leprosy. That's just you had an accident and then it healed, and this is the healing process proceeding. But if you do have a spot which is white or red-white or lower or spread, then you're in trouble. Then the priest is going to tell you that you are ritually impure and send you off for quarantine while you consider the sin you committed, which caused you to get leprosy in the first place. Everyone have a good week, and everyone stay well. God bless.